Proverbs 13:12 says that hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is like a tree of life. Hello, my name is Dr. Alduan Tartt, Christian psychologist, and I want to talk to you today about getting over grief and loss. And this is specifically for anyone out there that's watching this or has a family member or a friend who's having a difficult time getting over grief and loss. That means that after the normal time that you would expect someone to get over grief and loss, they're still feeling stuck. So it still feels like they're grieving a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later. And of course, a part of that is normal, but there's something called that psychologists call complicated grief, where you just can't get through the stages. It still feels like it's still raw. I mean, you're going through depression. Your life has stopped as a result of who you've lost, and you want to get out of that, or you want your friends and family to get out of that. I want you to listen up, because I'm going to give you the 3 P's that complicate grief so that you can make sure that you're not doing these 3 P's and grieve appropriately. All right? And then I'm going to give you a bonus tip I think that's going to bless you. Number 1 is personalization. This is where we blame ourselves for the loss of a loved one or a family member. Hey, if I had been there, I would have been able to advise the doctors to do something different. Hey, had I made mom and dad eat differently or made them exercise, maybe they would live a little bit longer. Hey, when dad came home and he said everything was okay at the doctor, and we found out later it was cancer, he was hiding it from us, I should have gone to the doctor. I knew my dad didn't open up about his feelings. I should have gone. Can you see how difficult it is to recover from that loss if you're still blaming yourself from it? You know, Sheryl Sandberg in her book Option B, which you should pick up or recommend to friends and family who are getting over grief and loss, one of the best books that I've ever read and inspired this post, talks about everything that happens to us doesn't happen because of us. We don't have any control over when we lose our loved ones. We just don't have any control of it. It's something that we all have to struggle with and go through the process ourselves and finding some type of peace with it. But when we blame ourselves, all we do is make our lives miserable, because there's nothing you can do when you personalize why someone has gone on to be with the Father. And number 2, this is where it's called pervasiveness. This is where, like, say you're getting over a divorce, okay? And say, unfortunately, maybe your husband or your wife cheated on you, or they're disloyal, or they were emotionally abusive. And you say, you know what, if I couldn't trust my high school sweetheart who turned out to be disloyal or abusive to me, or I trust my own dad or mother or whomever it is, then I'll never be able to trust another man or another woman ever again. You make a specific problem, a problem with your ex, a pervasive problem, so you'll never be able to date any man, any woman. Does that make sense? So it's hard to move on when you make something that's specific pervasive to everything. It's a mindset. And then number 3 is permanence. This is where you think that where you are right now is going to last forever. So it'll never be the same without mom or dad. It'll never be the same without the kids. And to a degree, you are absolutely right. It will never be the same. However, what people do is that they stop taking care of themselves because they lost their partner they used to do it with. So for instance, I had someone come in and talk to me, and they used to watch Law and Order with their mom and Golden Girls. That was their thing. And she got, sad many years later and said, I just can't watch those shows anymore. It's not the same not being able to talk about them, all right? But when we talked about it, there were other people that she could watch the show with. Now, it wouldn't be the same as watching it with mom, but she didn't have to give up something that brought her great pleasure. She didn't have to make something that was specific and temporary a permanent problem to where she could never be with other people. Now, she was able to date later and find a man that loved to watch those shows with her, and actually did that to honor, her relationship with her mother. So she was able to have a strong option B. Does that make sense? So if your option A is taken off the table, and that's what happens with loss, yeah, you want to do it with mom, you want to do it with your dad, you want to do it with your husband or your wife who's not there, or you want your old job or your old marriage, whatever it is, you want it. But you have to move on with life as well. So you honor the option A that always was that special person, but you also simultaneously start to present a pretty good option B. It'll never be as good as option A, but at least you have option B so that your grief and loss is temporary and not permanent. All right, so I hope that helps. I hope that helps. And if you feel like there's someone that needs this video, of course, send it to them so that they can grieve properly. It's already difficult, but when you add the 3 Ps, which is based on the research of Dr. Martin Seligman, who's a psychologist, the father of positive psychology, you make it almost impossible to recover from setbacks. And just one more bonus tip that I promised you: when you're dealing with grief and loss, don't tell people that the Lord won't put more on you than you can handle, or say, you know what, at least they're not in pain anymore. That doesn't help people to grieve. I know we say it, but have you ever talked to anyone that's gone through grief and loss? It doesn't help them. It makes them feel like you're just saying something. Ask them instead, how are you doing this? How are you doing today? How are you feeling today? You know, it's been about 6 months since you lost your mom and your dad. I just wanted to check on you and make sure you're okay. I know a lot of times we're nervous to bring it up, that we think that we're going to knock the person backwards. But when you don't mention it and you see them, it makes them feel invisible, and it makes them feel like you don't see their pain and you don't care. Okay? So just a little helpful hint when you're dealing with grief and loss. You know, don't say those cliches. Talk to people, interact with them, and find out how they're doing, because talking about their pain oftentimes makes them feel better. If they don't want to talk about it, they'll say, hey, let's just hang out and do something else. Okay, my name is Dr. Tartt, Christian psychologist. Take care and God bless.